There is 1 million people here in the state of Colorado that work in the private sector that don't have access to a retirement savings program at work. 1 million. That's 40% of our private sector workforce. And guess what's happening? They're not saving. These are people that work in moderate to low income jobs. They often jump frequently from job to job. And they're thinking they're going to be reliant on Social Security to sustain them in retirement. I think we all know it's not enough. As a matter of fact, in 2019, we ran a study, and if we don't do something about this, when people begin to retire and are only sustainable on Social Security, it's not enough. I mean, everybody believes that, right? Raise your hand if you believe. People are not going to be sustainable alone on Social Security. Can't do it, not in this day and age. So what happens? They have to rely on safety net services. They'll have to rely on Medicaid as well as Medicare for health care. They're going to have to rely on housing supports. They're going to have to even possibly rely on food security supports like SNAP program. Who funds those? Taxpayers do. These are taxpayer-funded programs, and I think we all are dedicated to make sure people aren't in desperate straits. But we calculated the actual cost of this over the next 15 years, and the bill is $18 billion over the next 15 years. There's no way, having served on the Joint Budget Committee, there is absolutely no way our state's budget can pay that bill without coming back to the taxpayers and asking for more money. So is there a different way to do this, to solve this problem? You know, we have para for our public employees. Are there any para members here? Yay! I'm a para member. I've been a para member since 1975 when I first started to teach. So, but our private sector employees, we want to stand up a program for them to help them save and supplement that Social Security. And what we discovered is there are 3 states, Oregon, Illinois, and California, who actually have created a really successful program. Each one of them in isolation from the other states, but it's called an auto IRA opt-out program. Now let's pick that apart a little bit. Auto means you're automatically enrolled. How many people know what an IRA is? Individual retirement account, right? And then it's an opt-out program. We're using some behavioral economics here. So these businesses that don't already offer a retirement savings program, we're going to have the employer automatically enroll their employees into this program. It's still voluntary for the employee. They can opt out if they want, but it's all done through payroll deduction, and there's no load on the business. We're going to use their payroll deduction, but it doesn't require the business to actually be a fiduciary and to do all the legal work. The board that I chair, the Colorado Secure Savings Board, takes on the role of fiduciary, does all the heavy lifting in a public-private partnership. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use payroll deduction to bring these savings in. The account is the employees. There's no taxpayer money going into these accounts. This is just the employee's savings. It goes into their account, and I mentioned a lot of these people are mobile. They move from job to job. Well, if they change jobs, they just pick up saving and payroll deduction in the next job. So they continue to save. And in the other states, we've discovered that about 70% of the employees stay in the program and continue to save. Many of them have never been able to save before. They get that first statement, they're very excited because they'd never had a chance. They couldn't figure out how to get started. But we're helping them get started, and it's self-sustaining because as soon as you find you can save, you begin to be good at that. They're going to need some financial education, probably need a treasurer with background in education. Who would that be? Anyway, so we're going to really promote this. We're going to pilot this in October and fully launch it in January or early in 2023. And we passed the bill back in 2020, thank you, Senator, to establish this particular program. We've been working intensely to get it ready and get it launched. We're moving faster than any other state has done for implementation. I'm good friends with the treasurers in all those other states. We've learned, they've shared their things, don't do this, do it this way. We've learned from that. We're also doing first in the nation a cooperative multi-state effort. And we already have a cooperative agreement with the state of New Mexico, who would love to stand up this program, but they don't have enough savers to make it economically feasible. The fees to the savers would be too great, so they can't get it launched. So they said, how about we join with you? So we're working on that, and guess what? It also lowers the fees for the Colorado savers as well. The more savers you have, the better the fee structure is. So we're pretty excited about that, yeah.
Is there a reason why you have to use a traditional IRA instead of post-tax Roth IRA?
It is going to be a Roth IRA.
Ah, good.
It is. And it's a non-ERISA program. We can't run it any other way. That's been tested in the courts in California already. So it's a non-ERISA program, but it has been tested in the courts. We know we can do it that way, so it's a Roth. Absolutely, yes.
Two questions on this. Does it have a default contribution rate? And do people have the option to allocate their savings to different types of investments, or is it a standard type of thing?
So I don't know if we picked up the question on the first question. So is it the standard IRA or a Roth? And I said it was a Roth IRA. Sorry, I should repeat that. And is there a default saving rate? Yeah, that's 5%. And this board that I chair is actually going to establish more policies on this as we move along. We want an escalator in there and a cap at the top end. What we've discovered is if you offer two, and the other part of the question was, you know, is there going to be a lot of offerings? How do people decide what kind of program they want to be in? And what we've discovered is part of the problem people didn't get started is the landscape is too complicated and they just don't know what to do. And so what we've learned is we're going to have target date funds. We may have a couple of additional funds for younger savers that want to take more risks, but we're working on the lineup now. But if we do too many things, people are paralyzed. So I think we'll default people into a target date fund, and then as time goes on and we enroll more savers and they start to articulate to the board that they want more offerings, we'll start to add those in. Does that answer the question? And it's an evolving process. We are actually working on these policies now as a board. So we've all actually hired the record keeper, which is the biggest part of this process. Those of you that are in Para, remember we just moved from Voya over to Empower. That's the record keeper on the public side. We have selected Vestwell as our record keeper for this program. Just went through a whole RFP process, very intense, and they're backed by BNY Mellon, so Bank of New York Mellon. So they have the deep capital. A lot of times these record keepers don't begin to make any profit whatsoever for 7 years. So you've got to have a company that's got some capital behind it in order to make it work. So again, it's a public-private partnership, but we're really, really excited.
I'm wondering, with our huge veteran population here in Colorado, over 300,000 veterans, if we're, besides looking at the people that are in the jobs that you described, if we're looking at anything for the veterans to target them in this initiative?
Well, it depends on if they're employed or not. If they're employed, then they come in.
Okay.
So, absolutely.
Thank you.
I believe it's in here.
Oh, I was just going to say the Roth IRA, regular IRA limits would apply, correct?
They do. The limits on the Roth IRA, and the previous question was about, can we do something for our veterans? And the answer, as you heard, was if they're employed and they don't, if the company they're working at doesn't offer a retirement program, they're opted in.
You mentioned a fee to savers.
Right.
What's the?
In statute, that's capped at 1%, 100 basis points. We have to move that down to 75 basis points, and that's for everything. That's for the record keeper, the fund managers that we will be using to invest the money, and it's going to become budget neutral. There'll be a little bit of that fee that comes back to the state to offset the startup fees, the startup money that we had to put in to get it going.
So 0.75% of what you put in would go to, if I can.
Operating expenses.
Operating
Yes.
expenses.
And usually that comes off of, so that's what I do for a living. I'm a certified financial planner and I invest money for a living. So that fee does come out, but typically you see it come priced into what you're purchasing. So you don't see it necessarily, and I don't know how this will work, but necessarily a lot of times you don't see it come out. If it's part of it, it's priced in. And like for instance, the S&P 500 500 largest company in the United States pays a dividend of over 1.2%, and that varies. So some of that dividend could go to pay for the fee down the road.
And so this is questions about the fee structure, 1% going to 0.75% or 75 basis points. Eventually, if we can attract other states in and are successful in a larger group of savers, we're hoping we can get lower than 0.75.
Yep.
So that's the goal, is to have more going towards the benefit of the savers. We've got to sustain the program. I mean, we have to pay people for the job that they do, but we want to really be vigilant about the fee structure.
Are there gonna be people who make who, although they are employed, make too little to qualify for the program, you can't take any more out of their check?
You know, that's a great question. And the question is, are there people that make too little to take anything out? And I haven't dug deeply into Oregon, Illinois, and California. I mentioned about 70% of the savers stay in, but 30% do opt out. And I'm wondering, and I'm not sure they have the data yet, but I'm wondering if it's people that just looked at their paychecks and said, we do not have any discretionary spending left at all. We are at zip, and we can't afford to pull anything out. If we do, we can't pay the rent, we can't buy food, we can't pay for prescriptions, so on and so forth, and they just couldn't make it swing in their budget. We also want this financial education piece to be an important part of that, and we think sometimes people think they don't have the ability to save, and as you know, Senator, often people may be expending monies, maybe they're hooked into high credit card debt and can't get out of that cycle, and they think they don't have any discretionary money, and if there's a better way to manage money and carve out what they were spending maybe that they didn't have to, that money could go to save for savings. You know, we passed this bill at the height of the economic downturn, and it was a real question whether or not we could get that done. And the comment that I made to people was, there's no day like today to begin saving. Compounding works, and as soon as you get people to begin to see, instead of paying interest, they earn interest, or they earn return on their money, it's kind of a light bulb that goes off, I hope.